Isn't ismessitude evil? How is more allegiance even romance? And wait, what's osmotism again? I've heard these questions time and time again. Troll romance has been misunderstood basically since it was introduced in the comic, and those misunderstandings have been propelled forward throughout time even as they were resoundingly disproved on screen. These misunderstandings can vary just as fandom does. Some are along the lines of quadrants are silly, fluffy stuff that all humans already do, and some are on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, like quadrants are an extremely unnatural and evil alien invention that's always toxic. I don't claim to be a Homestuck expert, but I do know how to read, and I can tell you for a fact that the comic itself is actually a lot more clear about these things than a lot of people remember. Quadrants are explained, and we do get examples of what they really are and what they mean, both the good and the bad. So, if you'll bear with me, let's see how all of these Fanon misconceptions are debunked plainly within the text of Homestuck itself. I'll start by explaining the basics of the quadrant system. Human romance is pretty straightforward and simple. There is one basic emotion that is considered to be love, and only that is counted as romance. It only needs one symbol, a heart. The fictional alien trolls from Homestuck, though, have a much wider depth of emotions that are considered romantic. Because of these, they need four symbols. These romantic feelings are grouped in half by whether they are positive or negative, red pity or black hate, and then again by whether or not they involve physical attraction, concupiscent, aka arousing, or conciliatory, aka calming. That's pretty easy to understand, right? The hard part is delving into the specific expectations of each relationship type, how they really work in practice. This is where most of the misconceptions that I'm going to unpack lie. Let's start with the easy one. Matesbridgeship is like human romance. It's got the heart symbol and everything. That's pretty much all you need to know about it. Of course, I have thoughts about how human hearts and troll hearts may work slightly differently, but at the end of the day, all those mostly come down to opinion. For all intents and purposes, these are the same. However, there is one extremely common misconception that I see related to these hearts, but I think it would be better addressed at the end of this video, after all the other quadrants have been explained. So let's move on for now. More Allegiance is described as a romance where two trolls serve as each other's better half. A troll who presents a threat to themselves or others will seek out a moirel who can pacify them and support them in return. This sounds simple, and yet it is an incredibly misunderstood quadrant. So let's get the big question out of the way first. Is more allegiance platonic? No. Even though a moirail is described to be a soulmate in a more platonic sense, it's also clarified that this sense is stemming from the fact that humans consider true romance to be sexual, and more allegiance is usually non sexual. Even if we weren't talking about aliens, this would be an incredibly unfair assumption. There are plenty of people in romantic relationships in real life who do not desire sex. Old people, disabled people, and asexual people, for example, all manage to have incredibly beautiful romances that are non physical. Calling more allegiance platonic or friendship just because of this would be absolutely absurd. There are plenty of examples of deep, emotionally balancing, and supportive relationships just like this in our media as well, ones that are often picked up on by the audience as being romantic. Is more allegiance queer platonic romance? This is an interesting idea that I've seen pop up a lot because of the previous misconception. The short answer is no, but the long answer is technically sometimes. Queer platonic relationships, or QPRs, are a type of relationship coined by aromantic people with the purpose being to have individually defined relationships that are outside society's rules and normal ideas of platonic or romantic. Moral allegiance, however, is an entirely normative romantic relationship on Alternia, with specific rules, which is not considered queer at all. That being said, because queer platonic relationships can literally be anything, if you were in a QPR and you and your partner decided you wanted to start having a troll romance like from Homestuck, that would be perfectly allowed. Troll romance isn't normative in our society, so troll romance might feel queer platonic to you. It's a bit like squares and rectangles, if that makes sense. Isn't this totally one sided and unfair? This is a take I'm honestly shocked I still see. I mean, I can see where it comes from. As some cynical Tumblr users have pointed out, the first two moral allegiances the audience is introduced to in Homestuck seem rather unbalanced. The first description we receive, too, implies a lopsidedness, as all that is described is a single violent partner seeking out a caretaker. However, this is a confusion that can be easily cleared up by, surprisingly, reading the comic. For instance, even though Nepeta and Equius's relationship has a rocky start from our perspective, they make it very clear by the end how mutually protective they are of each other, despite their story ending in tragedy. And despite Equius's many, many faults, it's true that he does care and saved Nepeta from a likely dangerous fate from the Scourge sisters. It's made clear that Nepeta's feelings take on just as much importance. She's not subservient to him either, and I get really grossed out when I see that sort of take. Nepeta does help Equius, but she's not meek about it. Her form of calming him down is literally tackle pouncing him. Humphrey insists as well that the effort in more allegiance is something that must be requited. And this is even her reason for breaking up with Eridan later, because their feelings not being equal means it must not be destined. Pre-retcon Terezi was in an extremely unhealthy relationship, but her retconned more allegiance with Vriska helps her out so much, and it's something that's balanced between them. The trolls genuinely talk constantly about how reciprocal and balanced healthy moral allegiance must be. Additionally, this theory often claims that only low bloods pacify high bloods, and a good chunk of moral allegiances that happen on screen are just literally not this. Aridin and Pfeffery, for example, are the reverse of that. So are Terezi and Vriska. Even though a lack of balance makes sense as a thing that would be common in troll society, it's obvious that this isn't the norm. In fact, they make that incredibly clear by having every unbalanced moral allegiance break up on screen, and then having those characters explain why it was bad. Some of these quotes are like extraordinarily on the nose about it. An even funnier version I see of this theory is that it's about boy girl pairs instead of high blood low blood. This makes even less sense for obvious reasons. The purpose of a Moirail is to take care of each other, protect, and better each other. Even though trolls themselves put a lot of emphasis on how this is reciprocal, I also believe that it's not really the end of the world if one partner needs a little more help. After all, there are people in real life with physical or mental ailments that rely on support and care from their partners. I don't think it would honestly be that fair for me to blanketly state that any and all relationships where one person does more work is automatically bad. Equal amounts of effort should be put in, but this will look different for every relationship. If you're in a relationship with a disabled person, you understand this. In conclusion, yeah, more allegiance is a genuinely romantic, typically healthy type of relationship. Alright, let's move on to the part all of you are really here for black romance. We'll start with the darkest of all, Kismessitude. In Homestuck, Kismessitude is described as a kind of intense, romantic arch rivalry. Most people, when reading about it for the first time, balk at the idea of Kismessitude. Hate romance seems like a thing that couldn't possibly exist. It's an oxymoron. Wouldn't dating someone you hate be unbearable or even dangerous? That's where we get this first misconception. Kismessis are supposed to kill each other. This is an assumption I often see people make about pitch romance, partially because one of our first examples of it are the violent interactions of Spade, Slick, and Snowman. However, in actual practice, this would make little sense in a troll society. I mean, trolls are required to keep their cosmesis around for when the Imperial drone comes knocking. It's one of the first things we learn. But additionally, we're told over and over in the text that murder is not the natural form a cosmecitude takes. Eridan mentions that violent bloodbath cosmecitudes are extremely rare in one of his first on screen conversations. Later, when we find out the backstory of Mindfang and Dualscar, Mindfang explicitly states that Dualscar trying to kill her ends their cosmecitude. In fact, she says that it turns their black romance milky and white, implying that killing someone is something you actually do to people you hate less? It's possible she's referencing platonic hate there, which, again, makes a very interesting distinction about how you would not want to kill someone you truly had pitch feelings for. And finally, we circle back around to Spade, Slick, and Snowman, from whom this misconception originates. But wait, hold on. Zoom and enhance on this killing really quick for me. What's that? Wait, you're telling me that Doc Scratch had to break Spade, Slick, and Snowman up for them to kill each other, and he even had to threaten their lives to get them to do it? Huh, interesting. Probably means nothing, though. Okay, fine, but Cosmecitude itself is still pretty toxic, though. Alright, most troll romance comes from media tropes, and this media trope doesn't usually end in murder.
I thought we had something special, Yugi. What, is our rivalry just one big joke to you? I committed to beating you in a card game, and I thought I could rely on you to be true to me as your most hated enemy. But I guess I was wrong.
Kaiba, it's not what it looks like.
I bet you say that to all the duelists. If I had had parents, I bet they would have told me that you were no good for me. And let me tell you one last thing. All those times I got angry and declared that I would have my vengeance on you, I was faking! Gah!
In fact, rivalry is considered analogous to romance for a reason. The reason that it works is because this feels romantic to us. The idea of having a committed relationship to a singular rival, having it be a special relationship that stands on its own like this, it's intimate. It's a trope constantly used to healthily improve main characters. Think of famous rivalries from media, how they spur each other on, push each other to be better. We already implicitly understand why competing with someone else is a motivation to work harder, become better. This isn't an alien concept at all. In the comic itself, this is described as healthy and romantic all of the time, or even as an enjoyable game. I mean, think of the love letter Karkat writes to John about how their hate has been destined in the stars. That's adorable. There's nothing scary about the way Karkat hates John, except for how embarrassing it is for Karkat. And you can't tell me you read all those teasing Kerezi logs where they were fight flirting and thought that sounded dangerous. Vriska and Eridan in the comic are described as using their cosmecitude as an allegiance in their seafaring, as trading and sharing their goods as romantic partners. They both thought of it as a fun time. When they broke up, it was amicable, and nobody got maimed. Mindfang and Dualscar, too, are described as having an enjoyable pitch relationship that they both cherished before Dualscar ruined it. Rezi's Caligula's relationship with Gamzee was disgustingly abusive. But if we were to understand that this was natural for this quadrant, then why would all of her friends be so concerned? And if Cosmecitude was always guaranteed toxic, why would Hussey go to all the trouble of showing Terezi healing from her bad Cosmecitude by entering a new, healthy, normal Cosmecitude? This wouldn't be written as a happy turnaround for Terezi if the relationship was doomed to be completely evil and terrible. That just doesn't make sense. The comic never seems to see it that way, and neither does Hussey. Mindfang refers to her Cosmesis as her lover, because trolls don't see hate and love as opposites. Karkat introduces us to their different dichotomy, the one of hate and pity. These are considered two halves of the one troll version of love. And the craziest part is, I shouldn't have even needed to explain all of this, because it is explained in plain words right in the comic. They talk about how pitch romance is a push and pull that can always be healthy and possible between humans, that is beautiful and rarely ever dangerous. It's about admiration, respect, competition, rivalry. Did you know a definition of rival is literally equal competition? Rivals are motivators. This is why enemies to lovers is such a beloved trope. But I hear you. Maybe all those examples of cosmecitude being good and healthy aren't enough to convince you. You need me to prove that trolls can handle correctly the bad shit too. And to that I say, hey, remember how there's a whole fourth type of romance explicitly made to handle that bad shit? We're introduced to Ospotism by Eridan trying to conscript Kanaya into helping him out. He claims that his cosmecitude is going to become violent if Kanaya doesn't do this. It's a manipulative and shitty thing for him to do, but it does tell us something important. Trolls don't like toxic romance. Trolls hate toxic cosmecitude so much that they have a whole system in place to stop it. Our most famous Oswitism example is probably the Vriska Kanaya Tavros Oswitism. Most fans don't know, however, that this one isn't a real Oswitism at all. It's a colossal failure. Kanaya didn't have real Ashen feelings in the first place. She was just desperate to be involved in fixing Vriska in some way. She sent out extraordinarily mixed signals, and also never actually made any Ashen relationship with these two official. But it does illustrate the concept for us. Trolls will specifically step in to stop bad relationships when they see them happening. Even among fellow trolls, in a society that encourages violent casteism and ableism, this, which every human thinks of as a sign that cosmecitude is unsalvageable, is actually thought of as too toxic by all the trolls. In fact, most examples people bring up of toxic cosmecitudes to try and prove that cosmecitude is evil are ones that other characters attempted to interfere with in ashen ways, either successfully or, in the case of Rose that one time, unsuccessfully due to being alcoholic. Hold on though, let's back up for 1 second and explain what osmotism is. What the fuck is osmotism? Isn't that just cock blocking? Osmotism is the most misunderstood quadrant of them all. Osmotism happens when two trolls are in a torrid or unhealthy relationship that is becoming a danger to themselves, others, or the social balance. A third troll will then start experiencing ashen attraction, aka the feeling of wanting to stick your nose into the business of that relationship and decide to mediate. A lot of people interpret this simply as cock blocking, but the truth is that in Homestuck itself, there are many different reasons an ashen romance can happen, and many different forms it can take. For example, the outer leaves can be crushing on a mediator, such as Eridan with Kanaya here. This involves, as we see in the comic, loudly having a pitch altercation in an inappropriate setting or trying to put someone in the middle of your affairs. Hussey describes a textbook example of ashen flirting as this. In more common scenarios, the mediator will step in themselves when they feel like the pitch romance is turning sour. This can also happen with trolls who are vacillating or flip flopping between the feelings of two quadrants when their feelings are very intense, something common for trolls to do. In this scenario, the job of an auspicious is to cool down the emotions of the other two parties until they settle into a single quadrant. To humans, this simple act wouldn't seem worthy of being called a romance. However, since trolls are such a brutal and isolated species, showing this much interest in someone's romantic affairs is basically asking to be a part of them. As far as we know, it's an intense, messy quadrant, deserving of respect, despite people barely remembering what it is. I thought Eridan was pitch for Solix. This is a really funny misconception because they say that this is wrong several times in the comic itself. Then again, that's the case for a lot of these misconceptions, so why am I surprised? No, the truth is Eridan isn't pitch for Solix at all. Vefri points this out right in the walkaround that most people attribute to starting the pitch aerosol theory. She explicitly says that Eridan is pretending to have pitch feelings for Solix in order to trick her into ospitizing for him. This is also literally what happens with Terezi as well, who also tells Eridan the same thing. as Hussey is pointing out how textbook Aridin is being. I mean, Aridin's acting is extremely transparent. He's not respectful of Solix at all. He doesn't cherish him. There isn't anything he likes about him. All things that we have learned are essential for real pitch romance. This is entirely about acting ashen, about pretending to have an unhealthy pitch romance. In fact, we have examples of how Aridin acts towards people he actually canonically has pitch feelings for, and it's completely different. When he's with Vriska, they're allies and competitors. Once she starts ignoring him, he runs to Kanaya, pretending their relationship is about to get really violent. Sound familiar? Towards Rose, he is again respectful and complimentary, because he's trying to start a romance with her. This is entirely different from the bait he's doing with Solix and Feferi. Basically, this is all Aerosol actually was. Ash bait. But what about mediators? There are no benefits for them. The troll who said this, Kanaya, was actively forcing herself into compulsory Ashton relationships that did not fulfill her at all, when we know that in some of those cases, she didn't even feel that way about them. In actuality, we have plenty of examples of Ashton relationships that are fulfilling, that the people inside of all benefit from. For example, probably our best example of Ashton romance is one that I somehow never seen talked about: Jade Cat, a popular ship in the Homestuck fandom that somehow no one knows is Ashen, even though it's mentioned more than once. Jade and Karkat have an extremely toxic relationship of bullying and strife, leaving both of them flailing at their missions. But when the two of them come together and mediation happens, they learn to work together, to tolerate each other, and to turn that hate into something amiable. And this is a relationship that's canonically Ashen, too. Nepeta calls it Ashen, as does Hussey, and Kanaya and Dave even both poke fun at Karkat for obviously feeling romantic towards Jade, when Karkat isn't doing that to himself. A canonically Ashen relationship that improves both of their lives greatly, especially Jade, who experiences a character turnaround that allows her to fully blossom into a leader. And Jade enjoys this too. Not only did it help her complete the session, but it was a part of her life that she appreciated. They were Ashen, and they benefited from that. Retcon Vriska benefited from being an auspicious on multiple occasions. She diffused many unpleasant problems before they could happen, securing her importance and admiration. Kanaya learns from Vriska how Ashen romance can be good for someone who's actually suited for it. Vriska benefited, Jade and Karkat benefit, even the courtyard droll is having a good time. The moral of the story is, yes, auspitism can be rewarding in its own right. Most of the quadrants can. We shouldn't listen to the chumps who say otherwise. However, despite what we now know about quadrants, it's obviously not all sunshine and rainbows. There are reasons people might not like the quadrant system or not want to use it, which brings us to troll queerness. Queerness works differently for trolls than it does for humans. Gender is not an important social construct to them, so they don't really have a concept of homosexuality. Every troll dates whoever they want, and they reproduce bi or pansexually, so gender isn't a real factor in that beyond preference. For trolls, queerness instead has to do with not being able to abide by the quadrant structure. This is introduced to us through the Vantises. Karkat's character arc is about accepting himself as a mutant, and also, by extension, as troll queer. For a quick rundown on what that means, it means he can't keep his quadrants straight. I get it. No, but seriously. He feels the feelings of every quadrant, red and black, pale and not, all at once. Now, don't get confused. Vacillation, or switching between quadrants, is normal and expected for trolls when they're very emotional, as long as they settle back down into a single quadrant in the end. But Karkat doesn't just vacillate. He wants someone in every quadrant, like a desperate fool. He mixes up the feelings attributed to each quadrant, enough so that he doesn't just vacillate on his partners, but can't even decide on what romance he wants with them. This makes him a nightmare to date, because he's trying to flirt with every possibility at once, leading to no small amount of confusion and infidelity, the kind of vacillation situation that an auspicious is supposed to prevent. Towards the end of the comic, Karkat learns to accept himself and gains a relationship that is completely unlabeled and unrestricted, quadrants wise. It seems pretty straightforward. Now, here's where we finally go back and address that misconception from the very first section. Oh, so is Beyond the Quadrants human romance? No! Fuck no, absolutely not. That is not what that means, not even a little bit. Why would anyone think this? Okay, this is an old misconception, dating all the way back to the days of John Cat Yowie. Yep, that's right. Some people took Karkat saying that he wanted someone in all of his quadrants to mean that he wanted monogamy. And hey, human romance is monogamous, right? So it's a perfect fit. Unfortunately, if you were to actually pay attention at all, you'd notice that this isn't that simple. Karkat had a girlfriend in the Hearts quadrant, but decided he wanted to be spades with her too. This isn't a problem that simply human love will fix. Karkat wants to be mean, he wants to be pitch, and he wants to be pale and ashen as well. Human romance isn't these things. Even though we have these tropes in our media, these things are not usually accepted in our relationships in real life. Caretaker relationships without sex are considered unfulfilling. Hate based rivalries are considered depraved. And threesomes where everyone's annoyed at each other, well, those don't even really exist in the cultural consciousness yet. Karkat doesn't just want mushy human monogamy. Yes, he is a romantic, and he is a sap, but that doesn't mean he's too much of a wimp for pitch romance. Far from it. He's one of the most hateful characters in the whole comic, and it's a genuine part of his charm. He can't have a relationship without hate in it. It just wouldn't work for him. So no, troll queerness is not the same as human romance. Wait, isn't every troll queer then? No. I get why people say this. Multiple trolls in the series are shown vacillating on each other. Vriska and Terezi are a big example I can think of. But the truth is, vacillation is completely normal to trolls. It's even expected. It's part of the original troll romance explanation. For fuck's sake, it's even how Karkat manages to justify and deny his queerness to himself for so long. The only caveat to this is that trolls are expected to eventually settle down into a single quadrant. As Pfeffery says to Eridan, they can't be in two at once. Karkat was the only troll who couldn't do this, and that's what makes him queer. That's why he's the only one who's queer. Are quadrants inherently evil? I mean, no. Obviously not, right? Otherwise, why would Homestuck go to all of the trouble of showing us the multitude of ways they can be healthy? Even go so far as to have the characters explain it to us at the end there. What is unhealthy about quadrants is the fact that they're enforced. That's what makes being queer dangerous for Karkat. That's what makes quadrant mishaps so worrying for young trolls. If they can't provide material for the Imperial drones, their lives are in danger. That's terrible. That's genuinely terrible. And if we're being honest here, I don't think the violent, oppressive culture of ableism and casteism and warfare was really helping. Like, I think maybe that was the main issue going on, the dictatorship. That's why it was so beautiful for them to get to leave Alternia and leave those cultural expectations behind. But the thing is, that's not a problem unique to Alternia. Now, I don't know if you know anything about the history of human marriage, but it also famously wasn't always something done willingly or under the best circumstances. And yet, we understand that this doesn't mean all human romance is inherently evil or bad. Not just that, but in the comic of Homestuck itself, human romance doesn't even have a lot of perfect examples. Jade and Dave Sprite, John and Vriska, Dirk, really just the entire Alpha Kid session fell apart because of a multitude of toxic relationships, all of which were human romance. It wouldn't be fair to judge all of troll romance for having some toxic relationships between stupid teenagers when all of the human romance is like that too. It would be really hypocritical. And it would be ignoring the beautifully written development of characters like Dave or Karkat, who both learn to overcome their culture's rigid ideas of romance and accept themselves as queer, finding a way to enjoy their romance again. Overall, there's a lot of shocking misinformation that goes out about quadrants. Obviously, it's fine to have headcanons, and it's fine to not like the idea of being in these relationship types. Unlike on Alternia, nobody's gonna force you to be in any of them. But that also doesn't mean that these relationship types are wrong and evil just because we don't understand them. I know plenty of people who are into these kinds of things and enjoy them. And they're popular in our media as well, for good reason. They're interesting and fun. No, they aren't inherently evil. We shouldn't say a form of romance is inherently evil just because it's not normative. That's actually where you get a lot of issues in society, famously. So maybe quadrants are better than we think. Maybe quadrants are worth preserving, even. Don't let the haters get you down. Or do let them do that if that's what we're into, I guess. Hey, thank you guys so much for coming to my panel today. I've been your host, Relax Attack. It's been a really great honor to get to panel here at the final sahcon. Stuck at Home Con has meant a lot to me over the years, and I'm really truly sad to see it go. But the opportunity of getting to present here, even if my panel was definitely more than a little amateurish, was an appreciated one. This is my first time doing anything in this kind of format, so I really hope it was all enjoyable. Thank you to my friends and my brilliant partner who sat through and helped with all of my stress and rewriting with this up until the very last hour. I really enjoy getting to talk in depth about Homestuck, especially related to the trolls in Alternia, obviously. So if you're curious to hear more about any of this, feel free to shoot me an ask on my Tumblr, Relax Attack. I'm talking about quadrants all day, every day over there, as you could probably expect from this video. Once again, thank you all so much for being here. Thanks to the sahcon staff for hosting this wonderful event for so long. Wishing them well on whatever they're up to next. I hope you all have a sick, spooky season, and I'd love to hear what you thought. See you next time.